speak, like you are, to update you the latest developments in ocean, marine and maritime issues. And of course, one of the very latest developments you've all read about has been the recent meetings, the legislation or how to manage the area, the biodiversity, the area outside those bands of sea which are within countries' jurisdiction. This is the second in a series of 4 that we shall have this year. So I'm sure many of you have attended the first one. Welcome to those who are joining us the first time this time. And I would just like to give you a heads up that there are going to be 2 more this year on cutting edge issues. And so with this little background on why we do these events, why we're here, I'll just pass the mic proverbially to Cosmin, who will moderate this event today for us. And I just want to thank you all for being here. And I want to thank especially our speakers, Lily, Arne, and Claudia, for joining us today and giving their time and their expertise for all our benefits. So thank you all, and without further ado, Cosmin, in your hands.
Thank you very much, Antonella, for the introduction. Basically, as you mentioned, throughout this session, our expert speakers will draw attention to the key provisions and objectives of the High Seas Treaty, emphasizing its significance in addressing gaps in existing international frameworks. They will delve into the ambitions of the treaty, and also including the potential implications, challenges, and the future work that needs to be done from this point forward. We hope you will gain a comprehensive understanding of the treaty's potential to reshape the conservation and management of biodiversity beyond national boundaries, and hopefully setting the stage for a new era of ocean governance and sustainability. And I think we can now proceed to introducing our first speaker, which is Mr. Arne Langlais. Arne is a PhD student in Marie-Paul data. He studied the Bachelor of European Studies at Maastricht Universities after having visited the universities of Coimbra in Portugal and Sciences Po, Paris, and also completing the joint Master International Relations at Humboldt University Berlin, Freie University Berlin, and the University of Potsdam in 2019. His focus lies on international and European environmental policy, the political economy of environmental and climate policy, and also the study of international institutions and regimes. Methodologically, he is interested in quantitative methods and the application of network and system analysis methods on international politics. Arne, you may have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Cosmin, for this very comprehensive introduction. Maybe just quickly, can you see my screen? Give me a second. Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you for organizing this. Yeah, you all let me know. I'm Arne Langlais, and I'm happy to speak about the content of the BBNJ Treaty and how we got there. So I'm very happy that many of the IOI scholars or alumni are already a bit familiar with UNCLOS and some of the issues of the law of the sea, and so I can really go into detail to how some of these problems were solved or maybe addressed, at least in the BBNJ Treaty, and how the trade-offs and the deals looked in the final stages of the negotiations to conclude this instrument. On March the 4th this year, the news was everywhere, even as you see in the bottom right, in the landlocked country of Austria, the great news reached from New York that finally a BBNJ instrument was negotiated. So if somebody's interested to a really good insider story from the last days of the conference, you can click on this link later on. So we want to go a bit into detail now, what this means and why is it maybe not the High Seas Treaty as such. Yeah, BBNJ actually stands for the governmental conference to develop a legally binding instrument under the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. That's why it's called BBNJ. And I will speak a bit about what was it meant to do, what was it set out to do, and then how did we get there in the end, how was it negotiated in the end. And then I'll pass on to my colleagues. Liliana will speak a bit about the NGO perspective on that, and then Claudia on what happens next now, importantly. So very quickly, I think you're all quite familiar probably with the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. The only reason why I'm posting this slide here is to really emphasize that BBNJ, as it deals with biodiversity outside of national jurisdiction, is a lot of water. So it's roughly around 94% of the volume of the oceans, because it's all the deep spots are in international waters. From the surface, it's not quite as much, but it's still a significant amount. Roughly 64% of the surface of the oceans is international waters. Obviously, also depending on claims towards the extended continental shelf, but so far. What was the BBNJ Treaty? I think here is very important to mention that there were these 4 package elements, so-called package elements, that were then also accompanied by so-called cross-cutting issues that dealt largely with institutional issues and funding issues. The first package item was marine genetic resources. The second one, area-based management tools and marine protected areas, so MPAs. Third one, environmental impact assessments, EIAs, and the fourth one, capacity building and transfer of marine technology, CB and TNT is often called. And so it's a package deal because it means that during the negotiations, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So the states agreed when they came up with these packages or these package elements that they will be negotiated as one package. So there must be agreement on each of them, or there will be no treaty in the end at all. And I think this is very important to remember. So what was it meant to do? It was meant to do a lot of things, but for legal scholars or people interested in UNCLOS in particular, there are a lot of provisions in UNCLOS that address certain aspects regarding the protection of the environment that are not very well developed, not very operationalized. And there is this big question that a lot of judicial debate has been about whether or not resources and also organic resources, not just mineral resources in the area and in the water column form part of the common heritage or not. So this was also addressed in BBNJ, it's Article 136. Then create a network of MPAs, and I think this is largely the idea was to really give a tool and give strength to Part 12 of UNCLOS on the protection and preservation of marine environment, which is largely very broad statements of intention that are not very well operationalized. And then on EIAs, very specifically, there is this provision in UNCLOS, and now the question was how should these be conducted? And also on capacity building, there's also Article 266 in UNCLOS that many states lamented was never really filled with life. So this was also now the idea to develop this article and guarantee that capacity building will take place. Overall, from a political science perspective, I think maybe it's important to mention that there were some very broad interests that came together here. And I put these 2 pictures here to symbolize, on the one hand, this 30 by 30 campaign from Greenpeace that a lot of states, a lot of industrialized, developed states, also the European Union made part of their official agenda to protect or to create 30% of protected areas in the high seas by 2030, which is a very ambitious goal. But this was mainly like this, the broad interest from many developed states. And then on the right, you see the deep sea sponge. And this shows that there is a lot of economic interest and also a lot of questions regarding accessibility and fairness of access to deep sea resources that can be used for genetic research. That is a very, very fastly developing economic sector. So there's a lot of use in pharmaceutics and cosmetics and so on. How did we get there? What were the important points in the negotiations in the end to bring us to finalize the BBNJ treaty successfully? And here in the first package item, which is the regenerating resources, there were some very important compromises and the interests to be balanced. So this package now, or the provisions on MGRs now guarantee that there will be a fair and equitable benefit sharing of regenerating resources. They consist of access, participation, but also monetary benefits, importantly, while balancing this with the interest of many developed countries that there should be as little burden on research as possible. So here this treaty really strikes a balance, and yeah, if somebody's interested, we can go more into detail now, but I'm not going to do it now. And so I think here the very big takeaway message or compromise is that yes, there will be monetary benefits, but they are all to be used for the implementation of BBNJ, which is the conservation, sustainable use of marine biodiversity and capacity building. So there will be no direct payments to any states, and I think this was a very, very good compromise. But all the money goes to the implementation of BBNJ. And it's a flexible system as well. It consists of a flat rate sort of idea system that where already some monetary benefits flow. But then it can develop a mechanism that includes digital sequence information and be harmonized with the system on the CBD. Again, we can go into a lot of detail, but for the sake of this webinar, I'm not going to do it. But if somebody is interested, I'm always happy to chat about the details of this package item. And I think this was one of the many very, very issues that were discussed in the very end, and they were resolved in the last night of the negotiations. And to my analysis, brought a very, very fair and also really good compromise for the future. How do we deal with whether or not also organic resources and also marine genetic resources in the high seas are common heritage of humankind or not? And so now the deal is, as you can see here, that under Article 7, General Principles and Approaches, there is a principle of common heritage of humankind. And it's kind of balanced by this principle that the freedom of marine scientific research remains intact. So this was very important for many developed states, that they don't want some sort of, didn't want some sort of ISA's management sort of style where the international body has to be asked before any sort of cruise or expedition can be done, but scientific research remains free. So, yeah. It is now a common heritage of mankind, but scientific research remains free. I think it's quite a win-win situation, sort of. And here, I again, posted the maybe two takeaway messages. It is common heritage, but scientific research remains free, and the monetary benefits are to be shared, but with the purpose of implementing the treaty. On the next package item, area-based management tools and marine-protected areas. Here, I think it's important to note that this is really the first mechanism, the first system that can, or the first body, first regime that has the power to implement or to establish protected areas in the high seas ever in the history of humankind. It is, however, not already a 30 by 30, but it is a tool to get to these 30% protected areas. Many people ask about what sort of things will be allowed or forbidden in marine protected areas. And all this depends on the state that proposes it, and the state that proposes it specifies this in the proposal. And so the individual measures really depend on the individual proposal. There is a relatively strong role of the scientific and technical body. And I think also some of the criteria that are to be taken into account are quite revolutionary in terms of international law or law of the sea. Such things as connectivity that may, for example, open the door to adapting protected areas to, for example, migratory routes of species such as whales or so forth. What is, however, really a big open question in this regard is the involvement of other bodies and frameworks. And so there are already many existing organizations that deal with certain aspects of marine biodiversity or with certain regions in on the ocean, and how are they to be included in the process, or in how far they should, actually implement the measures foreseen, or how far they are to be consulted, needs to be really developed, or needs to be seen in the case-by-case, while going through such MPA proposals. I think here, when talking about the deal, the negotiation that had to be done in the end, it is really important to note that there is the chance to have a marine protected area without consensus. So this was a big interest by many states, that you cannot have one state blocking and vetoing everybody else. There needs to be some way of around it. So now there is this two-tiered process where, if a 2/3 majority agrees that all efforts for consensus were made, a 3/4 majority can then vote and put an MPA into effect. The compromise was, on the other hand, then for states that really do not want the MPA, they can opt out. So there will be the opt-out possibility, but this was made as burdensome as possible, I would say. So the states that wants to opt out needs to provide a justification, a proposal of an alternative, and needs to renew its justification. So you can opt out, but it's a very burdensome process. So I think here also, in terms of the last-minute deals that were made, there was some, you can somehow summarize it maybe also with the interest of certain states, and here maybe probably China is to be mentioned, that really also agreed to this compromise, that there can be MPAs by majority voting, but there is also a clause that makes it harder or to establish MPAs in the South China Sea, which is something that probably every sane human being would not want to do anyways. But this was a very important deal in the end, where really states negotiated with a very open and fair mind and took into account each other's interests. In the third package item, environmental impact assessments, here I think this was mainly about operationalizing the UNCLOS provision, and there was the idea was to have a very strong focus on consultation and transparency. Again, I think the criteria or the indicators that are taken into account are in this sort of scale for international waters quite new. So to have economic, social, cultural, and human health impacts that can be taken into account when assessing a certain activity is quite new. Importantly here, the relation to regional processes and other bodies. If EAA is already conducted in another body, then this can be taken into account by the BBNJ system, and so the state wouldn't have to do it twice. All stakeholders have plenty of opportunity to consult and participate. And now the big question was, in the end, who can decide and based on which threshold? And here I think the compromise was, there was a lot of discussion whether it would be an activity or impact-based approach to what needs to be assessed. And again, I think I'm very happy with the outcome, that is, it can be an activity even within national jurisdictions. That should just think about the extent in international lawmaking that states gave up sovereignty to some extent here, that any activity that has an impact on high seas biodiversity may be subject to an EAA under the BBNJ instrument. There is, however, in the end of the day, it will be the state that proposes the activity that needs to decide on it, not the international bodies, so not the bodies of the BBNJ instrument, but there is a call-in mechanism. So a party that doesn't agree with the decision can challenge this decision, and there needs to be some justification. Concerning the threshold, there is a two-tiered process. So the first one has a rather low threshold, minor or transitory effect of the activity. There needs a screening, and then a scoping of the activity needs to happen when the threshold is a bit higher, substantial pollution or significant harmful changes. Here, the takeaway message, And it has a lot of buts, but there are a lot of buts in the process of conducting an EAA on a BBNJ instrument. It is based on the impact, so it can be quite a broad obligation to conduct EAAs. But in the end, the states that proposes decides, again and again, but this decision can be challenged by other states. So again, a very tricky, very creative way to combine the interests here. On the last package item, capacity building, again, was already part of UNCLOS, but it was now operationalized. There, it was very important that this is actually a very strong provision that really also guarantees developing states that there will be capacity building and the transfer of marine technology. And so this will be also now reviewed and monitored, and it will be based on the needs. And so the developing countries can make a needs assessment, and then this feeds into the capacity building process. It was important that many states want to be careful not to duplicate already existing measures. But I think what is good is that there is already secured funding from the beginning through different financial instruments, and so that it was a big guarantee to developing countries that there will be capacity building. Yeah, I think here there were no such hardcore state interests that need to be compromised. This was also the first package item that was already agreed upon at the end of the negotiations. But overall, so now to summarize, maybe the main deals and trade-offs that were the issues that are highlighted in bold underneath every slide. Marine biodiversity is common heritage of mankind to be shared with all, but scientific research remains free. Monetary benefits will be shared, very big step, but with the purpose of implementing the treaty. MPAs by majority, but with an opt-out and not in the South China Sea. EAAs decided by the state, but with a transparent process that requires justification and allows funding from the beginning. And so that leads me to the end. I haven't checked my time, to be honest, but I hope I'm fairly okay. Maybe Cosmin, you can give me an indication. Do we take questions now or in the end when everybody presented?
Thank you very much, Arne. We're going to take questions in the end, after all the presenters have delivered their statements.
Perfect. Then thank you very much for listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Arne. It was an excellent presentation. As those who are familiar with the IOI, the common heritage of humankind is one of the main aspects of the ethos of the International Ocean Institute. And as you rightly mentioned, there have been compromises like every politically negotiated instrument. But thank you very much for rounding up everything in your presentation. Just a short, please add your questions in the Q&A section, and at the end, when we transition to the Q&A, our presenters would be happy to answer your questions. So add them in the rubric as we go along. Now, it's time we introduce our second speaker, Ms. Liliana Rodriguez Cortez, who specializes in community-based tourism and coastal zone management and has worked in ecotourism enterprises and as an advisor in community-based tourism programs for the promotion of conservation of marine resources and their sustainable use with the private sector, local and international NGOs, and the foundations for the Ministry of Environmental and Natural Resources in the National Commission of Protected Natural Areas of Mexico. Lily, if you could switch on your camera and share your screen.
I think we can also add that Lily attends the UN processes in New York and a representation of the IOI, right? And I think this is your experience that you're going to bring to us today. So.
Yes, thank you, Antonella. And I'm just trying to share my screen. I'm not very familiar with with Teams.
We're seeing your desktop now.
Okay. Let me see. How do I stop that. I guess I have to bring it to this. I have two screens, so it's a little bit hard to manage here.
I think at the moment we are seeing your second screen.
Okay, are you seeing now my screen?
Yes,
second
but
screen.
it's empty.
Okay.
It's a very beautiful picture though.
Of course, it's ocean related.
If you want, maybe Cosmin can do the backup as we spoke. Will it help? Hello? Did the screen freeze, Cos?
I think she's trying to. Let's see.
Okay.
There
Lily?
was in the chat, until we fix the issue with Lily, there was a question for Arn, which I think we can take right now.
Okay. You'll connect with Lily, or I can phone
Yes,
her as
while
well.
we're connecting with Lily. Basically, we were asked, what do we mean by scientific research remains free? Does this mean independent? And does it mean that ISA can conduct deep sea mining research and exploration in the high seas?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I was hoping that I could actually do some research before answering this. No, but on the ISA issue, yes, ISA exploration and research will remain largely untouched by BBNJ instrument. However, what could happen is that, for example, further exploitation maybe by the ISA of resources in the seabed could technically fall under the EIA provision of BBNJ. So, because it will have an impact on the water column, which is subject to the BBNJ regime. So that would probably require an EIA under BBNJ. However, what exactly remains means that scientific research remains free is that I think this was largely targeted to the fact that public research will not does not need a permit before entering the high seas to conduct research, to conduct a research cruise. So this provision or this principle was put in there to guarantee that there will be some reporting burdens on the researcher, but the researcher doesn't have to ask for an allowance to access the high seas for research cruise. So this is what it was the intention, at least. However, how this really plays out will need to be seen, I think, from case to case. And it is a bit of a question: what is, what sort of research falls under this? Because different countries use also, different sorts of vessels for their research. For example, military vessels or also private vessels. So this remains to be seen how this plays out. Actually, but good question. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Arn. I'm seeing that Lily has joined us again. Lily, I'm ready to share my screen if it makes it easier. Lily, you're muted currently.
Okay.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Welcome back.
I'm sorry for this. I usually use Zoom, so I'm very new with Teams, so my apologies. So I will be sharing my screen now, and let me know if you can see it. No.
Still just the desktop.
I think, Lily, it might be helpful if Cosmin does and you just tell him next.
Yes, I can share on your behalf.
Okay, thank you, Cosmin.
You're welcome. You are seeing my screen?
Yes.
Perfect.
Well, thank you very much, Cosmin. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Sometimes technology works on our favor, and sometimes it doesn't. Most of the times it's from this side, right? But anyways, I would like to share with you today. First, I'm very thankful for the invitation, and I'm really honored to be part of this and to have been part of this very thoughtful process, representing IOI as a delegate at the UN. And I would like to share with you some reflections of this of the BBNG as an observer. As I said, and Antonella mentioned, I'm delegate of the IOI, but I'm also a co-founder and CEO of Fundación Aramacao, a foundation based in Mexico. And we focus, our mission is to work a lot with coastal communities, a lot of promoting the conservation and sustainable use of coastal or marine biodiversity, but also how do we include that relationship with allowing people to really interact with nature in a sustainable way. And I think that's not part of mine. Okay, then we can go to the next one. Great, thank you. And as Arnold was saying at the beginning, and he presented a map similar, we are talking and on areas beyond national jurisdiction. But the main thing in here is, why is this important? And Cosmin mentioned as well, and I would like to reinforce that it is very important that a lot of the things that have been discussed in this treaty are things that Elizabeth Mamborges have proposed from the very beginning, since the 70s, when it was the UNCLOS. And she proposed the common heritage of mankind, the benefit sharing, and also to have the common heritage of mankind to the entire high seas, not just the seabed and not just for minerals. But this is something that has been brought up to the attention of the whole community for many years now. And this new treaty is really something that allows us and engage the whole community and the whole governments to do something positive. One of that is to engage cooperation and coordination for the promotion of biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdictions, which cover, as we have said before, the two-third part of the ocean. And establish also comprehensive marine protected areas beyond national boundaries. This is going to be a big challenge for everyone, because it's already hard for us to manage and to have surveillance and to implement marine protected areas within our boundaries. But it will be very interesting how that's going to happen on the high seas. Another important part of this treaty is that it will the operationalize of the general environmental impact assessment provisions, in UNCLOS and reflect modern environmental impact assessment practice. It will also provide the use of best available science and transparent sharing of biodiversity data. It will operationalize capacity building and the transfer of mining technology and ensure countries have the resources, the expertise and the skills to fully benefit from the treaty. And we can go to the next one, please. So a little bit more of the inside, how was it to be in the room and how did it happen? But first of all, the attendants were members and observers. Some member states were there. Also Paris to UNCLOS, and as an observers, there were specialist agency and NGOs, and it was a very, very interesting to see how challenging it was for some countries to be part of this process. It is important to understand also that the organization was also in groups, and for this treaty, some groups were created, namely the core Latin America group, which include all the countries from Latin America, which make the negotiation a bit easier for that group. There was the African group, there was the G77 plus China, and there was the alliance of small island Pacific states, and several other groups also. So to say that this was a very, very inclusive and transparent negotiation, while everybody was really active. And the role of the NGOs was very, very important, and especially those NGOs that had more than one delegate and have all the resources to really provide capacity during the negotiation to help states understand most the scientific part and the policy part, and how they will come up with better tools to negotiate. And we can go to, and also to provide the countries to have this strong negotiation. And I think we can go to the next slide. So what is next after this? We have an adoption of the treaty, and I think the next presenter will dive a little bit more on this. But what we really need to focus on right now is that to understand that the BBNG provides opportunity to hold both the states and IGOs accountable for their actions and commitments, but to continue engagement is needed in these other fora to ensure that they follow through. We are already challenged with managing the ocean as it is now, and adding this treaty is adding more responsibilities. So we will need to really have capacity for all the states. And I think the role in this case for NGOs that are really engaged on this treaty is to provide really and to help with that capacity to push a little bit more states towards signing and ratification, and the role of NGOs will really be helping implementing through capacity building and really supporting especially developing countries. And I think that I will end up here. Thank you very much, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you very much, Lily. I'm sure Our guests will have a lot of questions at the end, since you've been in the room, you've seen the negotiations, and it's been quite a wild ride, I think. Thank you very much. I will now introduce our next speaker, Miss Claudia Kremens, who joined the IDRI as a research fellow in international ocean governance in 2019. She studied liberal arts and sciences with a specialization in global justice at Leiden University College. Previously, Claudia worked for Client Earth in Brussels as EU fisheries lawyer with a focus on the implementation of the EU's common fisheries policy. She has also completed traineeships at the European Parliament and at the Embassy of the Netherlands in New Zealand. Thank you very much, Claudia, for joining us, and please feel free to share your screen.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. I think it should work. Yeah,
it's working.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks first of all, Cosmin and Antonella, for inviting me today for this webinar on the high seas negotiations. It's very exciting to be here with all of you. And I'm looking forward to receiving your questions after my presentation. So I'm going to talk to you about the next steps in the road to implementation. And just going to see what I can go to the next slide. Yeah. So I will talk about 3 different things today. So I'll talk about the timeline. What are the next steps in terms of timeline? Then the second topic will be preparatory activities. What can states and other actors do to prepare the activities and to prepare implementation, prepare ratification. And then the third thing that I'm going to talk about is the agenda of the first COP. What are the things that we have to think about? So as we previously heard, there were 2 main celebratory moments this year. So in March, when the treaty text was finally finalized in the middle of the night, and then also in June when the treaty text was adopted. But it's very important to let you know that it has been very long. Think tank focused on sustainable development and international relations is the long and winding road that my former colleague Glenn Wright wrote. And you can see that negotiations, they started already, or the discussions about the need of a new international legally binding instrument started already in 2002 when the UN was discussing the protection of the marine environment. And in 2004, there was an ad hoc working group established to study issues. So all the way from, almost 2 decades ago, we now got to the point that we have a treaty text. So I think that's already an accomplishment in itself. And if we zoom in to the timeline, we can see that a lot of things have happened so far. And so for the next steps, the first deadline or the first important moment that will come up is the 20th of September this year. So it's during the UN General Assembly that the BBNJ Treaty will be open for signature. So it will be quite a big event, and we suspect as well that there will be many states that will signal their intention to participate at this point in time. So for those who maybe do not really know how it works, so first states, they signed a treaty, and it's really to say, okay, we would like to be a state party to this agreement. But then they have to go through the national ratification process. So it depends on each country how this works, to what extent the parliament is involved, what kind of voting system they have. And after it is ratified at a national level, then states, they bring their ratification to the BBNJ Treaty Secretariat, and they express their consent to be bound to the treaty text. So this is a bit of the process that is normal with international legally binding agreements. And one thing that might be interesting to mention is that there's also a provision in the treaty text on provisional application. So that means even before the entry into force of the treaty text, some states, they can say that they would like to apply or would like to abide by the treaty already before the entry into force of the treaty text, which I think is quite interesting because in a way we don't really know how this would work out, because there's lots of things, as I will mention later, that the Conference of the Parties still has to decide upon, or like the rules they have to create, or the bodies. So I think it's more almost of a symbolic way of saying, okay, we're going to do more cooperation and coordination, or already think about how to implement the treaty. So in general, the treaty will enter into force 120 days after 60 countries have ratified the treaty. And if you think about it, there is this high ambition coalition that was created by France and the EU during a conference in Brest last year. And this high ambition coalition already is composed of a bit more than 50 states. I don't know the exact numbers specifically now, but I think it's like 51 or 53 states, and includes the EU, for example. So in a way, you would say if all these states that are part of the High Ambition Coalition sign and ratify the treaty, then we can easily get to 60 countries. Another thing to also to let you know is that I actually learned today that one of the reasons why the negotiators chose 60 countries in the end is that if they would have chosen 30 countries, then it would be mostly the EU, probably, that would be signing and ratifying the treaty. So it was not seen as it was not seen as a good move, or it would be too easy to get the agreement to enter into force. But this is something I heard. This is of course part of the negotiation. So as long as I have been in the room, of course, during the plenary discussions, but a lot of negotiations were happening behind closed doors. So some of the things you hear are, we have to kind of believe what people have said. Then another day to remember is June 2025, when the UN Ocean Conference will take place in Nice, in France. So France, together with Costa Rica, is organizing the UN Ocean Conference, and it aims to choose this date as the date when we can announce that the treaty will be officially entering into force. And this is also the date that civil society or NGOs are using in their activities to help states with raising awareness about the importance of the treaty. So actually, if you think about it, it's quite an ambitious timeline, because, for example, for the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, it took 12 years to get to 60 ratifications. And for the UN Fish Stocks Agreement, it took 6 years to get to 30 ratifications. Another thing to keep in mind is that, of course, it's great to have 60 ratifications or 60 countries joining the agreement. But in the end, we're talking really about a treaty that is managing global commons that all states have to manage together. And also in the preamble, it's mentioned that there's an aspiration of universal participation. So in the end, the more states that join, the better. So how can we prepare for the implementation of the BBNJ treaty? So this is something that, together with other authors or other experts on BBNJ, I've started thinking about. So we published an article, which I'm happy to share after this webinar, where we were looking at how to fast track implementation of the BBNJ treaty. And in general, we came up with, or we looked at 3 different ways to help with the ratification and implementation process. So the first step is the bringing the agreement into force, or actually I shouldn't call it a step, because all these activities can happen in parallel, but there's basically 3, the activities can be summarized into 3 categories. So bring the agreement into force, building up the institutional mechanisms, and developing capacity, science, and technology. So I'll just go into detail into that now. So the first category of activities that can happen is bring the agreement into force. So even though 60 states, if you consider what I just said, and I really believe in this high ambition coalition signing the agreements, then it doesn't seem too far away, 60 ratifications. There still needs to be quite some work done to encourage states to raise awareness about the importance of the BBNJ treaty and why it's important to ratify. So based on other treaties and agreements that we've studied, there are several lessons that we've learned that can help encourage and support states to ratify, such as a special treaty event to promote participation. So this is something that will happen during the UN General Assembly on the 20th of September. Then also a lot of states and other stakeholders, they can conduct or outreach activities such as regional workshops, webinars, and high-level events. So this is also a way to raise awareness of the importance of the BBNJ Treaty. Another way to help states to ratify is to help them with dedicated financial and technical support, such as model laws, legal checklists, or legislative guides. Because some states, the areas beyond national jurisdiction seems still quite far away. So not all states are also prepared from a financial or technical or legal perspective to integrate these new laws and obligations into their national laws. Another thing to do in terms of preparatory work is a preliminary capacity and technology needs assessment. And just to give you a bit of a perspective of what is happening now, or the things of the state of play of the commitments that have been made. So Dualis, the current secretariat based in New York, has developed a website, or temporary secretariat, has developed a website and outreach material, and has planned to organize regional workshops to raise awareness about the agreements. There are also two pots of money dedicated to the ratification process. So you have the EU Global Ocean Program of 40 million euros and the GEF fund of $34. And both of these programs, they really aim to help states to ratify the treaty. So I think this is a very great opportunity for states, especially developing states, to make use of, to really inform the different ministries that are involved about the consequences of the BBNJ treaty and why it is relevant. Also, when these funds were established, the High Ambition Coalition was also encouraged to help with the ratification of other states. So there could be some cross-sectoral or from a transnational way of helping each other as well to encourage as many states as possible to ratify. So the second kind of issue, the second package of topics or things that we can prepare is to build up the institutional mechanisms. So in particular, I saw actually that Daniel Cajaris is in this call, and he has published a very useful 2-pager. Maybe he can share it in the chat, on the relevance of a preparatory commission. So a preparatory commission serves to already help draft rules of procedure, terms of reference, agendas, financial regulations, guidelines, etc., to already prepare for when we will have the first conference of parties. Because as you can imagine, we now have the treaty text, but now we have to think about, okay, what kind of decisions need to be taken? Who, for example, what kind of interim subsidiary bodies do we need to ensure that we're ready for the first COP to decide on who is going to be part of the scientific and technical body, for example. And the preparatory commission can also start identifying needs, good practices, options for operationalizing a clearinghouse mechanism, for example, identify and map key provisions, and prepare guidance for national and regional needs assessment. There are two ways in general how this preparatory commission can be established. So first of all, it's through a UN General Assembly resolution. So this can be either through the Oceans and the Law of the Sea Omnibus Resolution. I actually learned about this only recently, that this existed, but every year, at the end of the year, around November, December, there is an Oceans and Law of the Sea Omnibus Resolution that's adopted at the UN General Assembly. So this could be one of the decisions one of the decisions that the UNGA can take, or it can also be a standalone resolution. So some states or negotiators, they prefer a standalone resolution because often the agenda for the Omnibus Resolution is quite packed already on ocean governance, and a standalone resolution would also mean that it can be adopted throughout the year. Then the third category of actions that we can take to prepare for implementation is to develop capacity science and technology. I would say that in the publication that we've published, there are quite some ideas, but just to highlight a few. So for example, what would be useful to do is to already do a global assessment of the capacity building landscape to examine necessary infrastructure for BBNJ related activities. We can also think already about the financial mechanisms. How are we going to fund, for example, area-based management tools or including MPAs? And how can we already think about the coordination efforts to prepare for area-based management tools? Already map existing organizations and their mandates and think about the not undermining approach. In terms of environmental impact assessments, we can identify and address gaps in expertise. On marine genetic resources, we can already enhance capacity of international scientific partnerships and access to technology. And of course, we should not forget there's already a lot of initiatives that are going on, such as the UN Decade of Ocean Science. And how can we use this initiative or this momentum or existing partnerships to expand them or expand the mandate of certain organizations to create more capacity for the implementation of the BBNJ Treaty. So then I'll go almost to my last slide. So what should be on the agenda of the first COP? So this is quite an interesting question. So in general, it's important to emphasize that the role of the Conference of Parties, or the COP, is to keep under review the implementation of the agreements. And apparently there are 122 references in the text to the COP. So that already shows you that that COP has a lot of tasks that someone has to think about already. What kind of activities are we going to, or what kind of decisions are we going to take during the first COP, or which decisions can be postponed to like the second COP, for example. And in terms of timeline, again, the first BBNJ COP will be held no later than 1 year after the entry into force of the agreements. And we'll need to decide on, so these are just some of the examples that I listed here. So the rules of procedure, the seat. So for the moment, we have Dualos that's acting as the interim secretariat in New York, but Chile and Belgium are interested to host the future BBNJ COP, or the secretariats as well. So who of these two states will be eventually the country where the seat of the secretariat will be held. Also, we have to think about funding, the budget, a voluntary trust fund, how to ensure that especially delegates from developing countries can attend the negotiations, and where does this money come from? The frequency of meetings. Besides BBNJ that I attended for the last 4 years, I'm now also attending the negotiations at the International Seabed Authority, where I'll go to next week in Jamaica. And I was quite surprised to see that they have how many meetings they have actually. So there's one assembly meeting per year, but the council is meeting more regularly. So there's really a lot of back and forth of negotiators going to Jamaica for these meetings. Is this something that we want to do for BBNJ or not? In a way, you could say, well, it would be good to have 2 meetings per year if you consider all the challenges or all the things that we have to decide on in terms of BBNJ. Also, the COP will have to decide on the size, the membership in terms of references and modalities of subsidiary bodies. And then again, I'm coming back to the clearinghouse mechanism. So in the treaty text, it says hereby the clearinghouse mechanism is established, but what will be its role and modalities? These are the things that still have to be clarified. And then to end my presentation on a note of reflection as well, is that As you can see, there's lots of decisions that still have to be taken that are kind of technical, but also strategic. And the first states that will ratify can decide on all of these questions. So I think that's something that is very significant and strategic. And maybe if you talk to a state representative in the near future, you can use that as an argument to let them know that it's useful to ratify the PB&J treaty if they want to be part of it. So this was my presentation. Don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions that we don't have time for today. And thanks again for listening.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for your really engaging presentation. I think a lot of our guests had this question in their minds. What's next? What's going to happen? Are we still on the long and winding road? And I think the answer is yes, we're still there. And I saw already a couple of questions directed to you. And I'm guessing we can now move into the Q&A session. Coincidentally, perfectly on time. So thank you very much to all the speakers. And just 1 second, I'm gonna bring up the Q&A panel. Also, just a quick notification for our participants. If you prefer to add a question or make a comment verbally and on camera, please raise your hand and I'm going to give you the necessary permissions. Okay?
I think you've got 2 questions already.
Perfect.
Live. Yeah. Okay. So Cosmin, it's well, first of all, from me as well, thank you to the speakers because I really enjoyed your presentations. I did learn as well, so that's really great to pick up more details as you go along, because always being in the room, studying the process gives you a perspective that maybe from the outside, with all the other competing things for our attention, we don't have the same kind of detailed view, the same kind of hands-on, literally the pulse, I think, of the process the way you do. So it's always great to hear directly from you who've been there, what the situation is, how the process is going, and what comes next. I think it's always very useful for our audience to hear what comes next, what's now. I think everyone's spoken of the ship has arrived and maybe there's a way to go before we can, pack our papers and go home. Maybe we will take the first questions from the floor. And
the first question is from Dr. Ahmed Radwan, and I'm gonna give you the necessary permissions in a second.
Fantastic.
Please, Dr. Ahmed, you have the floor.
If you would introduce yourself and just pinpoint the person to whom the question is addressed, that would help everyone. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna give you 1 minute in case you're having technical difficulties, and we're gonna take the second question from Nandini Harihar.
Hello,
Hi,
Nandini.
Oh, yeah, now I can unmute. Hi.
Fantastic.
Turn my camera on so it's a little more human to human interaction over virtual settings. So hi, thank you very much for this presentation. It's actually been really, really helpful to hear from everyone over here. So I actually have like a range of different questions across one that I've identified actually for Claudia, but the others are more broadly to the other speakers. So for Claudia, my main question to you is, what is the impact if some states don't ratify the BBNJ treaty? Is it like business as usual in the high seas, and can they continue conducting different types of activities that they're doing without an EI, without an environment impact assessment? And my more broad question to all three speakers and other experts over here also is, although we've had a lot of marine-related decisions and treaties that have come out in the last 18 months, what future do we actually see for these actions at a global and national level? How do we envision it to be different from the insufficient action that we saw under Aichi target number 11? And that was a much smaller target of 10% of our EEZs to be like protected areas. And here we're talking about 30%. How are we envisioning to integrate the different types of targets that we see at a global convention to deliver on SDG 14? And finally, where is blue finance coming from? I know it's a lot of questions that I'm unpacking. I've put a couple of them on the chat in case in case you guys have forgotten. I know it's a lot I'm throwing, but it would be great to hear from everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Claudia, would you like to start with the one that's specifically aimed at you, and then?
Sure, yeah. Thank you very much for your questions. Maybe I can say, I can try to be briefly address all three. So the first question, what do we do when states do not ratify? Well, this is unfortunately the difficulty with international law, because we cannot force states to agree to things that they have not ratified or signed to or agreed to. So it is true indeed that for the moment, this would mean that they would continue with business as usual, if you want to call it like that. But at the same time, what we do have in international law is customary international law. So depending on how many states will ratify and will abide by the regulations, at a certain point, it will be part of customary international law, which means that they will still have to abide by the provisions that most states adhere to. This is the same case for UNCLOS, for example, whereas the United States has not ratified UNCLOS, it still abides by, I would say, the majority of what is included in the treaty text. Then your second question, sorry, oh yeah, regarding Aichi targets. So it's important to underline that the BBNJ treaty is an international legally binding instrument. So the Sustainable Development Goals, the Aichi targets, they are non-binding. So we're talking really about a different scale in terms of international law. And in the treaty as well, we have an implementation and a compliance committee that will be established that will monitor the implementation and compliance of states with the provisions in the treaty text. So I think this is really something quite ambitious and extraordinary that is included in the text. So also the states have lots of monitoring and reporting obligations to ensure that there is some type of oversight of whether they comply with what they have agreed to. And there's also a dispute settlement provision included in the treaty texts. So just to say that this is quite, a positive development. And in general, if you look at UNCLOS, it's quite well respected. And then on your third question on funding, there is one specific provision on funding in the treaty texts. I'm not an expert on this specifically, and it's quite a long article. It's Article 52, if you're interested to have a look. But there will also, so part of the funding comes from the Global Environment Facility Trust Fund, and there will be voluntary trust fund. It's like composed of different types of funding, and there will be a kind of a finance committee that will be established that will develop further rules. So the details still have to be developed at this stage. Thank you.
You're muted, Cos, but if I may jump in, I think Arnie wanted to add something as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Antonella.
Okay, it's fine.
Thanks, Nandini, for the excellent questions. Very critical questions, but it's good. And I'm very happy now because I think I can really complement Claudia's legal view with maybe a political science perspective, thinking more about the sort of dynamics that can come into play. So maybe also quickly on the first question on the states that will not ratify. I think, like, from a political science point of view, sort of there is, you can change the behavior of states often through public naming and shaming, and to do that, you need to have a baseline from which you decide, or you can distinguish between the behavior that is acceptable and that is not acceptable. And I think this didn't exist on the high seas. So up until now, there was no, let's say, rules by which you can say what you do is acceptable and what you do is not acceptable. And there was not the reporting requirements that this will be made visible. And so I think this BBNJ treaty can also establish some sort of different dynamic where even states that are not have not ratified may be under public pressure to change their behavior because many other states expect them to, and you can actually pinpoint to misbehavior, and it's documented and it's seen. And so I think on the question whether really also the targets of the have teeth and whether something will happen, I think this again there will be a different dynamic at play now compared to the IG targets. As Claudia mentioned, it's a different legal status because it's legally binding, but also it will be in international waters, and any single state or a group of states can propose MPAs. So this can really, kick off a dynamic where states want to become like public champions of MPAs, and they go ahead and push certain MPAs or certain proposals forward, and then the other states are somewhat pressured to react to that, or at least if they don't want to have this MPA, to at least justify why not. And so and I think this will be because it brings a lot of consultation and documentation and a lot of publicity to this, that states can use this to also create an image of themselves as champions of the high seas, and it's a very attractive thing to do. And so I think we're in a much better position to actually reach these goals than with the more soft law IG targets. Yes. And on the finance, again, I think I can, as Claudia said, I'm also not too much of an expert, but there is a broad variety of funds that can be used. So, and I think also I was very involved in the MGR chapter, and also that there will be the flat rate payments from the beginning, regardless of the use of MGRs now from developed countries, is a very good step, so that there will be money from the very beginning. And I think also that the EU has already pledged 40 million for early ratification. So there is a very it's very attractive to quickly ratify to use this money for your own capacity building. So I'm very optimistic, let's say, maybe too optimistic, but yeah, this is my analysis.
Thank you very much, Arne. Lily, would you like to add to the previous questions?
Yes.
Lily, you are still muted.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, no. Okay, thank you. Yes, just jumping into what Arne said at the very end about finances, that's going to be really important, and really it's very interesting that the European Union have already pledged some fund for this, because the most important and interesting part for the implementation will be to have the capacity, to have the money, to have the resources, to have everything in place to really allow many countries, especially developing countries, to understand how we can implement this treaty. And that will be the key, as was the key and is still the key for UNCLOS. We still need to work a lot on capacity building within our boundaries. So it's very challenging. What are we going to do outside of those boundaries? But yeah, one key issue is once we have funds in place, it will be easier, I think, for many developing countries and developed countries to continue that capacity.
Thank you very much, Lily. I saw a question in the chat from Mihai Burka, who's saying that we waited 10 years for the treaty, do we now have to wait another 10 years for ratification? I don't know, Claudia or Arne or Lily, if you'd like to add on this.
Yeah, I
think
can, or maybe go for it, Liliana. Go for it, sorry.
it's very, very brief. I think that we have a lot of pressure from the from the global community. And I think at this point where we all understand how is the climate change affecting every country, the whole global community, I think that with this pressure, I think that we have the countries more aware that we need to move forward to be able to do something.
Claudia, I saw you had a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Cosmin. Yeah, indeed, these negotiations and the preparatory activities have been going on for a very long time. But at the same time, as Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, said, it's really an achievement in terms of multilateralism, especially in today's world where it's more and more difficult to get together and to have the same mindset or to agree on some kind of ambitious objectives in terms of environmental issues. And I think in that perspective, the BBNJ treaty, but also the plastics negotiations that are going on, that also, of course, impact ocean governance. They really do give me hope for the future. And what I thought it was quite ambitious when, for example, with the plastics treaty, they aim to finalize this in 2024, which is already coming up very soon. And now we have the ambition to, or like many states and civil society have the ambition that the treaty will enter into, the BNJ treaty will enter into force in 2025, which I think is still pretty soon if you think about all the different interests and actors that will be impacted by this treaty, and of course the marine biodiversity. Of course, you can think about it from the perspective, well, aren't we all already too late with all the impacts of human pressures and climate change on the ocean? But it remains complicated, and I think I just broke something, sorry. It remains complicated to negotiate something like this with all nations all over the world. So I think it is quite impressive. And of course, it's easier to negotiate something or to agree on something when you're just maybe with 10 states that think like-minded. But to get to a position, for example, that the treaty text was adopted by consensus, yeah, I think it's quite impressive.
Thank you very much, Claudia. I'm not sure if Dr. Ahmed Radwan fixed the technical issue he had earlier. If you'd like to take the floor, please raise your hand. Also, I've seen briefly Auni popping up with Dr. Auni Benham. He is also a veteran of the negotiations. Auni, I think you have permission to speak. There you go, but you're muted. No, still muted.
You're muted. Okay.
Good.
Auni doesn't need introduction to the IOI family, right? But just for those of us who are here, who don't, maybe it's your first time, Auni Benham is the honorary president of the IOI. So, and as Cosmin mentioned, the veteran of these processes, you've been observing them for a while now. So we always look to hear what you're thinking about it.
I wish my experience would have changed my mind and answer Claudia to say how optimistic we are and working for the COP. I would want to just all what is being said is wonderful and it leaves us with some enthusiasm. As Guterres one day told us that we are at the abyss. Today he says we're at the epitome of multilateral cooperation. That's great. What I want to say is, what can IOI do in this time? Because I've been in negotiations. agreed on conventions that were never ratified. And whatever we think of the convention now, of the agreement, we have only one, should have one objective, is to get it ratified. And then once it's ratified and entered into force, then we can solve problems as they come. We're not going to go back in negotiating within ourselves about this convention. We have to accept it, and we have to work to make it happen. And that's the role for IOI. I'm sorry, Aaron, that IOI is not in the position of naming and shaming. No, IOI is there to assist, particularly developing countries who are, the EU doesn't need our assistance, but the developing countries need our assistance in getting this instrument to become a reality. And the process of ratification is very bureaucratic, very difficult, and they need as much help as we can. Rather than to think about the future beyond, we need to focus on assisting developing countries and countries in transition in getting down to the nitty-gritty of ratifying and acceding to the convention. Now, that would not solve the problems that you mentioned earlier, but the step in order to solve that problem is to speed up the ratification and explain all what is necessary to create confidence and friendly persuasion. That's the way we can go in IOI and assist through this form of interaction or any other form. And my one message is we focus and put our activities and our that in ratifying and making this convention come into force. And then we hope we would be with you at the COP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Auni.
Yeah, thanks for this this message, and I think what this webinar is a very good way how IOI is already helping a lot, and I think this is now really the stage, as you mentioned, to convince people of the value of this treaty, and of course it's and to spread the message, and yeah, to try to do this with as many people and decision makers as possible, and really to highlight the benefits for, I think, every country of ratifying this treaty, and I think specifically for developing countries, it's a big. I mean, I'm really convinced that just to have the codification that also the biodiversity is considered common heritage of humankind is a big step, and there's a lot to gain for everyone. And this is really, yeah, this is also why we're so excited to be doing this, because we also, you know, are very happy about the chance to spread this message and to convey our thoughts. So I think what you're doing right now is already an excellent job. So thanks for the organization and for the invitation.
May I just one word?
Go ahead, Auni.
Elizabeth Borghese always told me that any human construct is not perfect. So let's not expect that this construct is going to be human-made. It has its you know, dangerous and whatever, but it is the only instrument that we have to save our oceans. And let's do the best of it. That's the message. And that's what I think IOI, and particularly the IOI alumni, can help in doing. I won't bother you again.
No bother at all, Avni. Thank you very much. I think if there are no more questions, we can draw. Lily, please go ahead.
Yes, I just want to add something very quickly. First, I'm very happy to see you, Oni. And thank you again for your message, for your words. And what can I do? Well, there are many things to do, but I think that joining forces will also help besides doing these kind of workshops that we are doing now. As Claudia have mentioned in their presentation, the regional workshops that can be done to help countries have this ratification, and also the regional workshops or the workshops that Dualos is preparing, and probably joining forces with them, and the more we are collaborating together, we can make this happen, spread the word, and bring that most to their attention, helping most of it developing countries to understand, because if they want to ratify, they need to have this within their law. So they need to understand also how this is going to work and how this can be implemented. So there's a lot of work to do. That's the final answer. But yeah, we can join forces, we can collaborate, and we can make.
Well, the dean of the IOI is there to listen to you, and that would put us on the track that you're talking about.
Thank you, Ani.
I think we can do one last round with the quick closing statement from all the speakers. And that's it for today. Claudia, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, actually, the statement that I had prepared, I don't have it in front of me, but just after the discussions we've had today, I think we can be happy with whatever we have achieved now with the BBNJ Treaty. It's really a landmark agreement for the ocean. And as you can see, there's still plenty of opportunities to be involved in terms of the next steps and ratification and implementation. So I encourage you all to spread the word to ensure that we can make sure that in 2025 in June in Nice, the BBNJ Treaty will enter into force, or even before that, if that's possible.
Very optimistic. Very good.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Arne?
Yeah, I think these were very, very good words towards the end. I think, yeah, just keep on spreading the news and the idea of BBNJ, and I really do believe that there are some, that this is it's not perfect, yeah, but it's the only thing we have, and I think there are some really useful solutions to some really large problems in there that are now just need to be taken to the next step. But I think there was some very, very big state interests, interest of national sovereignty that needed to be dealt with, and I think this was done in a very creative way. So it has a lot of potential, at least for the future.
Lily? Thank you, Arne.
Yeah, thank you, Cosmin. First of all, thank you, Antonella, Cosmin, for the big work that you're doing, for the big effort for putting this together. Thank you, Arne and Claudia, for your presentation. I also learned from you. There's a lot of things that we need to collaborate and to share within this BBNJ treaty to make it really work. And from different perspectives, from different backgrounds, from the science, from the lawyer perspective, from the policy, and we, I think that this leaves me with that force that we need to really work in collaboration to join forces to help developing countries to make this really treaty happen.
Thank you very much, Lily. Antonella, would you like to keep the topic of the next webinar surprise, or would you like to say a few words? You are muted. Antonella, you are muted.
Yeah. I just wanted to say just a couple of words on what, you know, we've just finished discussing. I mean, I don't know you, Cosmin, I don't know you, Auni, but I'm taking this as a personal challenge that, you know, to spread to develop capacity, to bring forward even more quickly the ratification of this. So for me, this has been very interesting, the debate. I know that there's a lot more left, a lot more road left to travel, and I would like to say maybe you'll both join these sentiments saying that the IOI is ready and prepared to do what we can do, what needs to be done to continue the capacity development, the training work we do, the work in professional development that we do with ocean governance practitioners from many fields. And in the spirit, maybe we can say briefly what the next webinar will be about. It will be offered in the third quarter of 2023. And I'm sure most of you are following the current debates on the deep seabed mining, the 28th session happening in Jamaica right now as we speak. And also many of you must be asking questions, what's happening with the 2-year trigger, what's going on with the developments in technology in deep seabed mining, what comes next. So in order to help make some sense of these happenings recently, we are planning our next webinar, dates to be announced, on deep seabed mining, the recent developments and the outcomes of the 28th meeting. So I thank you all for being here, but I also invite you, you know, to watch this proverbial space for the next webinar and the next people we'll be bringing in to you know, have this debate between us. Did I give too many secrets away, Cosmin?
No, perfect, Antonella. Thank you very much. Thank you all. We managed to stick to the time.
Yeah.
And
thank you
a
to our
big thank you to
speakers.
the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you to the audience, and it was wonderful to spend these 90 minutes together talking about the BBNJ as well, getting these insights.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Take care. Well done. It was very, very good. Thanks, Arne. Bye.